want you to imagine for just a minute, somebody's driving around. Matter of fact, maybe they leave Bolivar and they're heading towards Jackson. And they're driving around, their gas gauge is on empty. They're driving their car, it's on empty, and instead of filling up, they just stop every once in a while and they put a couple of dollars in that gas tank. And they keep on about their business, running around, just so busy with all the different things that they need to do. And so they just keep going, starts to get low again. They put a couple more dollars of gas in the gas tank. But eventually they end up stranded on the side of the road. Maybe they're on their way back home, coming back to Bolivar, middle of nowhere, and they find themselves stranded on the side of the road. Cars pass by, some people glance over and a little irritated with them because they're halfway in the road and halfway in the shoulder, coming back from Jackson, and they just kind of a little irritated at them. Some people kind of look at them a little judgmental, kind of go like, wondering, that's a nice looking car. Why are you sitting on the side of the road here? But what they don't realize is that though the car may look fine on the outside, on the inside, the tank is bone dry. That's how many of us live our lives. We keep running on fumes, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, until one day we can't go any further. On the outside, we look fine. But on the inside, we're empty. And without margin in our life, without true spiritual rest for our souls, they eventually stall out. Life with God is like pulling up to a full service station. He fills your tank up. He checks all the levels. And you can make it to your next destination without any problems. So today we're going to be looking at restful living. You just thought that, Jimmy was finished with his series out of Matthew and we were going to be done with Matthew, and guess what? Well, we're in Matthew. So, go ahead and turn with me to Matthew chapter 11, and we're going to look at chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. So today we're looking at restful living. Let's go ahead and read this passage together. Let's see, make sure I can do this right. All right. It says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Isn't that what we're looking for? Don't we want restful living? Don't we want rest in our life? Just the word rest just sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, I think a lot of us are looking for that. Give you a little bit of backdrop or background. Jesus is talking to a group of individuals. He's talking to a group of people who were extremely worn out because of the cultural pressures that they lived in. Time of Jesus' time, culture and religion were almost one and the same. You can see that experienced in other countries. Here in the United States, it's not quite the same. We don't really couple the two together. There's our worldly American living, and then there's also our church living. But in some parts of the world, it's one and the same. And in their culture, it was very one and the same. And so there was a lot of cultural pressures and expectations that was mixed with their own identity with God and religion. And so their pressure that they were under was even larger than you might expect because, and we've studied it before, because of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and their just religious leaders had added so much to the law of God. They had added so much. And I think maybe at the beginning it was meant to be helpful. It's much like, say you go to a museum and they have an artifact. And they don't want you to touch that artifact, so they put a little sign there. It says, "Do not touch artifact," okay? Well, then they put a glass globe over that artifact so that you don't touch that artifact. And then they put up a rope that you're not to go past that rope to touch that artifact that's in the glass that has a sign that says, do not touch that artifact. And then there's a line on the floor, maybe a zigzag line or whatever it is, and you're not to step past that line to approach the rope that has the glass over the artifact that has the sign that says, do not touch this artifact. And just in case you can't get this, they're also going to have a guard that stands there and tells you, hey, back up. This is kind of what was happening at this time. It might have started out good for trying to have them cherish the laws, to do the right things, but they started adding their own laws on top of it. They started adding man-made things that were just so cumbersome to the people. Matter of fact, on the Sabbath had over 600 added man-made laws just to keep on the day of rest. Can you imagine? The day of rest, and now you can't do this, you can't do that, you have to do something a certain way, you have to wash this way, you have to walk this way, you can do this. The day before, because you can't do something on the Sabbath, you had to do all this extra work, so now you're just extremely tired from all the extra work that you had to do on the day before. There was all these added things, and the people were constantly trying to please their culture, please the religious leaders, please God. They were working their way, hopefully, into a right relationship with God, but also because they didn't want to be outcast in their own society. They didn't want to be cast out of the synagogue. They didn't want to be socially outcast where they didn't hold a position or something like that. And so many times, the individuals try to do all these laws, which was impossible, to the point that they wore themselves out. They were exhausted from really pretending, trying to work their way for approval of others, approval of God, maybe even approval for themselves, a certain expectation they had for themselves. And so Jesus comes into the scene, and he goes, something that's very inviting. It's we call it the Great Invitation. He says, "Come to me." Not come to church, not come and do better, not come and work harder, but come to me. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary, all who are heavy laden." He goes, "And I will give you rest." The term weary there, you might have labor, but it means exhaustion, exhausted, fatigued, worn out. The people were tired, worn out, fatigued from all the stuff that they were doing, but it wasn't just physically, it was mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So he goes, "Come to me all who are weary," and then who are heavy laden, who have had these burdens placed on them. The word laden means to be overloaded. It's kind of a picture of, we might think of a mule being overloaded to the point that it collapsed, but it also really, when it says that term heavy laden, was very all times used in reference of a ship that was overloaded. A ship that was overloaded with so much cargo that it weighed it down and lowered it to the point that it ran ground. It ran aground. It ripped its hull. It became useless. And that's what was happening to these individuals. They were so tired, so exhausted, so fatigued, so worn out because of the burdens of society, because of the burden of religiosity. Can I say that? Is that a word? Because of the religious expectations, that they were overburdened by all these things that they had ran aground. They had collapsed. They had been torn open. And Jesus says, "Come to me, and I will give you rest. I will give you what you've been looking for." That word rest there, it means to recreate, it means to refresh, it means to restore. Man, it's a beautiful word. I love the term refresh refreshing or refreshness. For us, when we think of the word refresh, it's not just taking a break for the body. This refreshness has to do with the mind as well. The mind, soul. And what Jesus is saying, he goes, come to me. He goes, you are worn out, stressed out, who basically have been trying to work your way to God. He goes, come to me. Find that relationship in me. And I'm going to recreate something in you. I'm going to refresh something in you. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, for all who are in Christ are a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, all things become new, right? He's recreating in us. He wants to recreate in you. If you don't know the Lord as your personal Lord and Savior, He wants to recreate in you. He wants to give you an ultimate rest life. But you know what? He's also speaking to us. Well, a lot of times we might look at this passage and sometimes think that it has to do with just salvation, but really it has to do with justification and sanctification. It has to do with the fact of having a relationship with Christ, coming to Him, having Him restore you, to refresh you, to recreate in you a clean and new heart. But it also is about sanctification, how to walk with Him, how to grow, how to live a life in step with Christ. And so he goes, I'm here to give you rest, this refreshment, this renewal, not just from the physical part, but from the mental, spiritual. Illustration here. Now, a lot of people know much about teapots. I guess the younger generation probably don't see the teapots, and this is a fairly new one here in this picture. But a teapot, the way it works, you put it on the stove, you put a fire underneath it, and as it gets hot, it builds up pressure. And then it spews. It starts whistling. Ever heard a whistling teapot? And you take that teapot off the fire. And you know what? It keeps on whistling. Matter of fact, it continues for quite some time. Keeps on whistling. See, that's what happens to us. You can take us off of the fire in a sense. You can rest our bodies, but if we never quiet our minds, there's a water inside. There's something inside of us that is boiling. There's worry, there's stress, and it's still boiling inside of us, and we just keep on whistling. Much like that teapot. We still feel the pressure. Because we've rested the body, we've taken a day off, maybe we've gone on vacation, but we haven't rested the mind. We haven't been refreshed in our mind. And that's really an important part of our well-being and health and our spiritual life. So Jesus says, he goes, come to me, and I'll give you rest. And then he says this in verse 29. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Ooh. Now let me get this right. He just says, come to me and I'm going to give you rest, right? He's telling us that he's going to give us this relaxation. He's going to give us this rest. But then he says, hey, take up my yoke. Take this yoke and learn from me. So now he's telling them, hey, this is a picture of work. So you're going to give me rest. You're telling me to cease from my striving and from my work, and you're going to give me rest. But now you're saying, but you got work for me. Yeah. What makes you any different than these other teachers? And so it's interesting. I guess if we look at this term yoke, there's two things being said here, or that can be taught here. There's two pictures. When we think of a yoke, what do we usually think of? We think of an ox, right? We think of two animals that are bound together through a coupling, that yoke, and they are to work side by side with each other, right? Usually a farmer or a rancher or whatever, I guess it'd be a farmer that's using a yoke, of course, for plowing fields, but he would usually have two strong ox side by side, or he would usually pair a stronger with a weaker. But you would never really have two weak ones, two immature ones that don't really know what's going on. But he'd have usually a mature, stronger ox paired with a weaker or younger, maybe not so mature ox. The purpose of that was that the more mature and older ox would set the pace. He knew what to do. He knew how to go. He knew the direction to go. He knew how to work. But he also set the pace. A lot of times, young ones, they get ambitious. They get, ooh, I can do all this, and they just want to take off. And before long, they burn out. They stray off. They need to be trained. And so the older ox would train this younger ox or this weaker ox how to plow, how to go. He would set the pace. He also carried almost all the weight, majority of the weight. He was the stronger ox. And he would train and lead this younger one. It's the picture that we have, that Christ has given for us. He says, take up my yoke. Let me be that stronger ox. Let me set the pace for your life. Join with me and learn from me. I will set the pace. I'll carry most of the load. And learn from me. It's a wonderful, wonderful picture. But also, something that's going on in this culture right here that we need to understand is that the term yoke was also used quite often in reference to the law. They called it the yoke of the Torah, the yoke of the law. And so many of these rabbis or these religious teachers would have added all these different things, and they would say, in essence, take on my yoke. And there would be a family or individuals who would like the teachings of a certain rabbi, and they would decide that they would want to follow that rabbi. And they would say, me and my family will be yoked to you. They were going to learn or be mentored or be discipled by this rabbi. And so it's a picture that we're having here as well. So culturally, there's two pictures going on. There's the picture that you can relate to of the ox, strong and that's carrying most of the load, but also he's saying that also, let me be your rabbi that you yoke yourself to, that you follow. Become my disciple. Sit underneath my tutelage and learn from me. And they may ask themselves, but why? Why should I? Why should I learn from you? Do you see what all these other rabbis have done to us? They weighed us down. We're so tired. We're so exhausted. We can't make it. And he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. He's saying, I'm not like them. I'm gentle. I'm tender. I'm humble. It's not about me. I'm humble in heart. It means that I care for your heart. You can trust me. You can trust my heart. You can trust my teaching. Because I have your best in mind. And that's what he's telling them. And so he says, learn from me. We got to look at that word, learn. What is he meaning when he says, learn from me? Right? Sit underneath his tutelage. Matter of fact, in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1, it says, what? Therefore, we're to be imitators with Christ. I don't have that on there, but be imitators with Christ as beloved children. So we are to follow Christ. We are to imitate him. We are to live the kind of life that he lived. And so that means that we follow his teachings, his commands and his teachings, but also we need to look at his life. That word learn there meant to inquire, to ask questions, but it also meant to observe carefully. And Jesus is saying is that you need to observe my life. Look at how I live my life. Look at the way that I set the pace for life. So I went through and I picked some scriptures for us to just briefly look at and a few little points. If we look at the life of Jesus, how are we to model? How are we to be in step with him to have a restful life? One, solitude. Jesus withdrew to pray and rest often. It was a regular thing in his life. Mark In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up. He left the house. He went away to a secluded place and was praying there. It was secluded. There was no distractions. Here's a whole bunch of other verses that I just went and pulled out, but verse 4 of Luke, once again, he went to a secluded place. Verse 5, he often slipped away into the wilderness and prayed. Matthew 14, he withdrew from the boat to a secluded place by himself. John 6, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself, alone. He got away from all the noise and distraction. Just him. Next, he rested. We have a hard time with this sometimes. But you know what? Jesus rested. He slept. He took breaks. He retreated. Took little retreats. Mark 4 says he was sleeping in the stern. So you remember the storm was going on. He was in the boat. He was sleeping. John chapter 4. He's traveling. This was the woman in Samaria. He got what? He was tired from his journey, so he sat down by a well. He was tired, so he took a break. And he also seized an opportunity while he was there. Mark 6, after a busy day, says that the people were coming and going, and he said to his disciples, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." There's time to rest. There's time to sleep. There's time to take breaks. There's time to retreat away, to rejuvenate yourself, to rejuvenate your body, to get the rest that you need, to spend time with God. He lived in communion with God the Father. He spent time in prayer. It's interesting. If you look at, I just quickly put down all these little passages, but these are all major moments in his life where we see him praying. Do you know, he prayed at his baptism. It says, as he was praying, the heavens opened up. He was praying at his baptism. He prayed before he chose the 12. He prayed after the feeding of the 5,000. The entire chapter 17 is an intercessory prayer for his followers, where he's praying for us. He's praying for his disciples. In Matthew, he prays in the garden before his arrest. And even on the cross while dying, he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they did." Jesus was in constant communion with God. And he's saying, be aware of that. Watch that. This is how we are to situate our life. We need solitude, rest. We need to be in this constant communion with God. We also need community. Jesus traveled and lived with friends. He was constantly, seemed like he was either going or leaving from some party or someone's house to go eat a meal. He went to Mary and Martha's. He's friends with Lazarus. He hung out with his disciples. He traveled and lived with friends. Community is important. Church is important. The relationships that we build are important. Next, he lived a life in simplicity. He was never hurried. He wasn't in a rush. I want to tell you, he had a very busy ministry, but you know what? He wasn't hurried. It's interesting. He seemed like he was present in every moment. You remember when he was going down the road, he was on the mission to go take care of a kid, to heal a child, and here's this woman that was bleeding that touches his cloak, and he stops. And he's present in the moment, aware of what's going on. And he turns and he gives his attention to her. He's not looking at something in the background. He's not checking his phone. He was focused on her. He lived a life that was unhurried. He was present within the moment, and he was focused on individuals and the task at hand. And then service. He met needs. He fulfilled God's plan. Mark 10 says, For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So, as we look at Jesus' life, this is how we need to apply these things to our life. We need time that we withdraw, that we get away in silence and solitude, and we pray and we rest. That means turn off the phone. Leave it. We are so attached all the time that we're never alone. Somebody can always call us, text us, we get a notification. Find silence and solitude. Put that away. Get with God. You need rest. You need to sleep. A good amount of sleep. But also, it's okay to take breaks. When you're tired, take a break. Maybe take a little nap. It's okay. Jesus did it. You can do it too. Take some retreats. Take your vacation. Spend time to rejuvenate your body, but not just refresh your body, but refresh your mind. Take retreats. Take vacations. Spend time with your family. And then community, church family. Spend time with your church family. Live life with your friends. You know, Jesus had his disciples that he spent time with, but he had his inner circle. He had his soul friends. He had, what? Peter? John? Right? James? He had these close ones that were his soul friends that he spent more time with. In Scripture, we see him moving away and going away with them, that he didn't take the rest of the crowd and all the other disciples. You need to have some close friends that you can share with, that you can invest in, and they can invest in you. Simplicity, don't rush, be present, give attention. Man, we're rushing all the time, and so often we're not present in the moment. Once again, it's, I think, attached to our phones. We hear a notification, text message. I find it interesting that we can be in a face-to-face conversation with someone that's very intimate and serious, and we'll get a text message ding, and we'll look at that and read it, and sometimes even answer that while we're face-to-face with somebody. It's sad. Service, meet needs. Love God, love people. I like this. He says, so take my yoke upon you, learn from me. I'm gentle, I'm humble of heart. He goes, if you do these things, if you will observe my life, if you will live the way that I do, in step with me, you will find rest. You will find rest for your souls. This word rest is actually different than the rest that we see in the very front. The very first rest, they're from the same word, but they're different forms of it. The first one had to do with come to a cease or a stopping of your work and being refreshed, being renewed, being recreated, whereas this word rest means to basically be, to have a tranquil or a peaceful attitude or presence about you while you were still working, while you were still... Siri wanted to answer that. Once again, distractions. I've never had Siri try to talk to me while I'm preaching. She can learn something too. But yeah, to give rest, this rest here is to have tranquility or to have peace while still in your labors, while still working, while still living your life, the things that you need to do, to accomplish. So rest is this inner tranquility, peace, while engaged in necessary labor. He says, for your souls. The word soul there is talking about your mind, your feelings, your emotions, mentally, spiritually. And so what he's ultimately saying in this passage is you will be emotionally and mentally at rest or at peace while engaged in necessary labor of life. By walking in step with him. Now, I like the ending here. He says, "For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." The word yoke, once again, we know that it's this harness, or basically being paired with someone. We talked about how it was paired with a rabbi, where you're being a disciple of them. And what he's saying is, he goes, my discipleship, he goes, my teaching is easy. He goes, the word easy there means it's kind, or it's a good fit. And I love the picture. If we go back to the ox picture, is this yoke was custom made for you. It was carved out, and it fits you perfectly. It's not just a random one-size-fits-all. This one's custom made. It says this yoke is easy. It fits good. It's good for you. It's made for you. He goes, my teachings are specifically made for you, and they are good and useful for you. And he says that my burdens, well, they're light. They're not heavy. What are his burdens? Burdens are those things that he was giving us, right? His precepts, his commandments, to love God, to love others. He said that's light. Have you ever noticed when you go and you're out somewhere and you get the opportunity to share Jesus with somebody? Or maybe you get to help somebody that's in need. Do you walk away a little lighter? I don't know about you, but I do. I'm on a high, man. I share the gospel with someone. When I'm done sharing the gospel or helping somebody, and I know that God led that in and gave me the opportunity, and when I fulfill the commandments that he has given me to love others, man, there is this like a weight that is lifted. And when I walk away from that conversation, when I walk away from that situation, I feel just light. That's what he's saying. He goes, my burden, my concepts, my commandments, they're light. They're life-giving. This is restful living. See, Jesus, he was, you'll notice that Jesus, he was active in ministry. You know, he was busy. He was always healing the sick, teaching the crowds. He was loving the hurting, but he balanced intentional times of silence, solitude, and rest with the Father. He honored the Sabbath. He had a sacred pause. He knew that true restoration came from walking in step with God. In Jesus' life, ministry, service, and rest were not at odds. They worked together in harmony. His pace was never frantic, it was never hurried, but it was steady and full of purpose. And this is the rest that he wants us to enter into. This is restful living that God has for us. And I think we've read this passage so many times, and we maybe haven't caught this before, or we forgot it. And it's time for us to remember. As we close, I want you to go ahead and just close your eyes. And I have a few questions for you. Just a few words, things to reflect on, to ask yourself. First thing, ask yourself, have you confused being busy for God with being close to God? Have you confused being busy for God with being close to God? What weight are you carrying that Jesus never asked you to carry? What weight are you carrying that Jesus never asked you to carry? Three, Are you trying to earn God's approval instead of resting in his finished work? Are you trying to gain God's approval instead of resting in his finished work? Now, if you've been worn out, you're trying to save face in front of individuals on Facebook or Instagram or just your neighbor. Maybe you're trying to keep up with the world's fast pace of living, expectations that you have of others, that others have of you or yourself. Maybe even what you think the church expects of you. Today is an invitation for you to stop. Today is an invitation for you to stop. Stop serving. Not to stop serving, but to stop striving. Stop striving on your own. Stop trying to just be busy and do all the things because you think it's what's expected of you, what others expect of you. Quit trying to work your way to God, trying to gain more love or acceptance. He loves you completely and totally. Jesus says, come and step into my rhythm. To a balanced life full of rest, joy, love, and faithful service. To seek his face, to know what true peace is, to know what true rest is. And quit trying to do everything on our own. But just live in his true love and rest. He might be calling you today to lay down a lot of burdens that you've been carrying for a long time. You can do that at your seat. I'm not going to ask you to stand as we sing this last song. Maybe you just need to spend some time talking with God. Sit there in your seat, talk to him. Come up here to this altar. Spend some time praying. We're just going to do one song, and when the song's over, I'm going to say what I normally say. Y'all have a good connection. But it doesn't mean that this conversation's over with God. I truly do believe that there's individuals in here, I know I struggle with really resting with God. Trying to meet my own expectations, which are quite high, and the expectations of others. And God's saying, lay it down. Stop it. You've been forgiven. You can't earn my love. I gave it freely. And I'm the only one that can give you true rest. You're not going to find it scrolling on social media. You're not going to find it on a beach on vacation. You're not going to find it in abundance of wealth, money, success. All you're going to find is more and more weight and heaviness in your life because it will never fulfill. We need to let go of some things. We need to learn to say no. We need to quit striving on our own. Maybe we need to simplify our life. Maybe we need to get rid of some stuff. Maybe we need to quit worrying about what everyone thinks about us and truly just care about our Holy Father and what he thinks of us. And he's saying, you are my beloved child. I love you. I just want you to rest with me. I want you to get away with me. Silence and solitude and prayer. And I want to give you the rest that you've been searching for so